The global insurance industry is more than a market.
It's a movement powered by 3 million professionals around the world.
Together, we support communities as they rebuild after disaster.
Help businesses through risk and uncertainty.
Protect individuals as they plan for brighter futures.
This impact isn't possible without people.
That's why we attract, grow, and retain the very best talent.
Because when every voice is heard,
When every person feels they belong.
We don't just build careers.
We build a better tomorrow.
Belonging builds 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 tomorrow.
Thank you all for gathering for this important topic, both those of you in the room with us on this beautiful autumn morning here at Howdens and those of you online. Thanks so much for making the time for this. So Belonging Builds Tomorrow, we're talking about people with enhanced responsibilities, parents and carers, people with family responsibilities beyond the day job. And we're going to be looking at moving beyond policy. And the panel that we have who are about to introduce themselves to you are very generously sharing from personal experience the highs and the lows, what it takes to get beyond policy to a culture that is really enabling. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. And I wonder, can we go along perhaps in line and introduce yourself, your role, and any additional role you have, like a family role, and perhaps what brings you to this topic today, why you think this is a crucial topic for the sector right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Christine. I'm a professional indemnity underwriter at Jewel, which is part of Howden. I have worked here for 11 years, and in that time I've had 2 children. So both my maternity leaves have been my time at Jewel. I also co-chair the Parents at Work Respect group here at Jewel with my colleague Katie Prickle. And yeah, I'm coming today with my perspective as a parent and someone who's worked in this company, particularly for the last 11 years, and my experiences with that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine.
Hello, really happy to be here. My name's Rachael Bassett. I work at WTW. Basically, I'm sales operations to cut that short at WTW. I also co-chair the Caregivers Network and I co-lead the Neurodiversity Network. And what brings me here today, I think I'm very passionate about the idea of being vulnerable, to give courage to others to be vulnerable, because I feel that's what makes a safe space. So I'll be sharing my personal experience, and I'll try not to get emotional in any way. I just want to be able to share it and share my experience with within the workplace and that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. And just to say that emotions are welcome and it's actually probably pretty vital to getting to grips with this topic. Thanks, Rachel. Jake.
Thank you, everyone. So my name is Jake Arundell. I'm the Inclusion and Diversity Manager for Gallagher. I've been with Gallagher for 5 years now, which is like a very, very long time when I say that. But the time's absolutely flown. I'm father to a almost 2-year-old daughter, Ava. She's had 2-year-old energy for a very, very long time. I can tell you that. And the reason why I was so keen to join this conversation today is because I think that creating a space whereby we can foster an inclusive culture for everyone is so critical to our industry. And I think that this topic is of vital importance to creating that sense of belonging as well. So really pleased to be on the panel today.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jake. And as Roosa says, I'm representing Bright Horizons today. We're very much about getting beyond policy because, as many of you will know, because we work with a lot of the leading insurance companies, we provide practical support. So kind of getting beyond the policy in that sense, things like childcare, particularly backup care that swings into place on a given day when normal care arrangements aren't available and fills the gap, or coaching around the parent transition for the individual and the manager to make those better conversations happen. So we're very invested in things that are beyond the policy. Policies are vital, and in the insurance sector, there's been in the last certainly 5 to 10 years a huge step up in policy in this area. Parental leave policies, enhancing the carers leave policy that came in as a statutory responsibility. All of those things are really important and they're happening. We can't do without them. But what does it take to have those great policies become a great culture? And I think that's the nub of this conversation today. And I think when we chatted beforehand, one of the key themes that kept coming up was empathy, wasn't it? So one of the things I'd like to start with, and perhaps Rachael, to you first, how do leaders and managers demonstrate empathy? What does it take for that to be happening in the culture?
Well, empathy, I suppose, comes easier to some, the more than others. But empathy is it, isn't it? To answer the question, I'll share my own experience and just demonstrate some examples of where I've had a bad experience and a really good one. So I think the key thing to understand is that not everyone who is a carer has the stereotype of what we feel is a stereotype of being a carer. I think we need to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt and understand that everyone's going through something and it may not be what you think. So my experience was really, really hard to talk about. So my dad, he was an alcoholic, and he had dementia because of this alcohol abuse. Imagine sitting in the office and saying, answering the question, "How are you? How's it going?" "Oh, my dad's an alcoholic and he lives 300 miles away, and there's nothing I can do about it unless I take some time off work." And that is really, really hard to talk about. So how, that safe environment needs to happen. And so for a bad example, and I feel like a bad example is good to demonstrate a good example. So where I used to work, it's not in WTW, this is a long time ago, someone asked me how it was going, and I did have to say, my dad's an alcoholic. And the faces in front of me they did not want to engage in a conversation. Because if someone tells you, I'm looking after someone who's an addict, your thoughts are probably, well, he should probably look after him, get him into rehab. He brought it on himself. Yeah, okay, but it's not that easy, and also someone has to care for him. So thanks. So then that experience created a very bad experience for me, a very bad thought, which I carried forward to other workplaces. Where I am now, he died a couple of years ago because of this. But in WTW, I did get quite lucky because I said to my manager what was going on. And because he was so empathetic, he was just so interested, I felt I could say anything. And my career wasn't going to be damaged, my path or anything like that. And I could just say anything. And as a result, when I said, I've been called, he's up in Yorkshire, I've been called that he's on his last legs. Can I go? He said, just go. And I dropped everything and I went. I do kind of wish I had known it would have been that easy maybe a few months prior to it, because then I would have spent more time with him. But so, I mean, that point, I think the panel will continue to talk about how do we get to a point where I felt I could have felt safer talking about it sooner. But the end result was what I needed sooner.
Thank you, Rachael. Very, very powerful. Thank you so much.
Emotional.
Thank you for really, bringing the topic very open in that way. Thank you very much indeed. And I think what you're raising there is that most managers, when we're really up against it, would say just go. But how do we create the culture where it's known that that's going to be possible in advance? What would it take for that to come proactively, I guess, rather than reactively? But really beautiful example. Thank you very much, Rachael. Christine, what's your experience on this?
I mean, I've worked here for 11 years, and I really struggled when I first came back from my first maternity leave. I had terrible imposter syndrome. I thought I was not part of the team, and it was for a couple of reasons. The things that were going on at the time, the market had changed, and I'd only been underwriting for less than a year before I went on maternity leave. So my sort of understanding of the underwriting world probably wasn't enough for me to feel confident in what I was doing when I came back and had all these additional responsibilities. But my manager is very supportive. He's very open. He talks about his lifestyle and the way that he raises his children. He will leave the office if he needs to go and take on the care responsibilities that he has outside of work. And that makes it easier for me to be able to talk about what I need. And he is, I think, good at demonstrating to the team that you can do that and you can just go if you need to. And we have a very good trust within our team. We all know each other very well, and that creates an environment where we can be our best selves and come to the office. And I think that really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's another piece, isn't it, on top of it, that's about role modelling at leadership level, demonstrating and being visible about the fact that people have responsibilities. I think the way that works for businesses to accept that culturally is you've got to be performing as well, of course. If everybody was disappearing all the time for life outside work, then the business would grind to a halt. So it's got to be demonstrable that people are performing. But I think if somebody is in a leadership role and they're demonstrating that they and their team are all performing, and yet there is this empathy, there is this flexibility, that's the kind of essence of what we're driving at, isn't it? Thank you, Christine. And Jake, I mean, there's a kind of culture shift, I think, isn't there, in getting beyond the policy. There are many great policies in place. Sometimes people are reticent to access those. They feel they're sort of putting their head above the parapet, taking, say, shared parental leave or additional paternity leave or whatever it may be within different organisations, as one example, or being visible as a carer, and making use of policies. How do we get those conversations open so that the great policies actually can be used without people feeling that they aren't performing?
Yeah, carry on. So yeah, I think it's a really key challenge, right? How do you affect any cultural change within an organisation so that people feel they're able to maximise on policies? And I think that one of the things we're very keen to highlight today as well was that the policies only just go so far as well. So the wording of what's available, what you can do, what you can take, is really only one step in creating the inclusive culture that we want our organisations. It's about how do we help and support people to maximise on those policies as well, making sure that they get from those policies what they need as well, but also that culture of openness so that it is really widely accepted to take up those kind of offerings and what's available. Now, I know that, if you look at me, Sal, I'm in an inclusion and diversity role, right? I'm within the HR function itself as well. You might naturally assume that I'd be straight away going, well, I can take that, and then I've got this, and I understand what I can do there. But actually, I feel an immense amount of sort of parental guilt as well still when I am looking to take up policy or kind of booking time or using backup care as well. Still, for some reason, I still feel like if I'm taking backup care, should I be doing that? Is that the right thing to do? But of course it is. At the same time, now one of the things that I personally found that's really helpful in that space is kind of creating that culture of openness as well. So within our team, I'm very fortunate that actually we do have a really open conversation and dialogue about responsibility, whether that be parental or carer responsibilities. And I think voicing that does make a huge difference to people, because if someone's coming from a position of doubt or guilt, actually sometimes the most helpful thing they can do is to see other people doing the things that they are talking about. So whether that's sharing stories about colleagues who've taken up a new enhanced parental leave policy, whether that is just normalising the conversations as well. To give you an insight into one of those conversations, for those of you that are parents will appreciate this. My daughter was very, very sick while we were away, threw up on me 3 times during the middle of the night, all at 2 a.m. So I stood there covered in sick at 2 a.m. just kind of going, what do I do now? But actually, when we came back, we sort of had a conversation about the fact that actually, when I came back from leave, I was still a bit tired. Actually, I might flex a couple of my days so that I'm not necessarily coming back straight into the office on that first day, because actually holiday has been chaos because of having a sick child as a part of that as well. So, and I think that my manager personally has been so supportive of that. So I think that, kind of come back on that point, highlighting stories whereby people are taking policies, demonstrating, what you can actually do and how you can flex things to work for you, but also being a part of having those conversations and really advocating for, sharing those conversations. I will make a slight call out here as well. I am a man sat in this room. I know that potentially there are, or stereotypically maybe there are less men that are having these types of conversations. And I know my personal experience is that in history, those conversations maybe have happened less in male-orientated teams. I'm also now sat in a female-orientated team as a part of HR. And I absolutely advocate and say it's been an absolute game changer as being a parent, and how accepted it feels to take up offerings or policies or practices as well.
Thanks so much, Jake. And I think we were talking earlier about visibility and role modelling with leaders with Christine there. What you're role modelling is being male and talking about parental guilt. And I really thank you for that, because it's often been associated as a sort of woman's experience, but it's a parent's experience. It's just that you have to have a gender equity of parenting for that to become apparent. So I think it's extremely helpful that you're highlighting that.
Being covered in sick knows no gender.
Exactly. It's open to everyone. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jake. And I think that really leads us into another thing that's sometimes more hidden and more difficult for organisations to get at through policy, which is the whole mental load. What we're carrying that's the sort of invisible responsibilities of parenting and caring. By the way, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but I also have 2 children. One of them just started a job training as an actuary, actually, last week, and the other one's in university. So a little bit less sick, although, obviously in some circumstances. And I support my husband, who lives with a heart condition. So I know a bit about parenting and caring myself. And that continual mental load of thinking and planning and being ready to catch what may be falling and keeping all those plates spinning. And it can fall disproportionately on different groups. It can be invisible, certainly. How can organisations, Christine, make sure that we somehow surface that and acknowledge it?
Yeah, well, it's really tricky. And the insurance industry, I think, has changed significantly, even in the last 11 years that I've worked here. When I started at Jewel, the company was much smaller, and there wasn't women returning from maternity leave necessarily. So it wasn't, because we couldn't see that. And since then, the business has grown, and there's so many more people within there to talk about their experiences, and being very open about that, I think, just really helps everyone's understanding of the world and different things that people are going through. But I do think it starts with the policy change. I mean, like I say, when I started at Jewel, people had 1 week's paternity leave and the second week was statutory. Now, not many men were going to take the second week statutory because you need the money. You've just had a new baby. My brother works at a law firm. He had no paternity leave. He was told he could take annual leave, which is, when you've got 4 weeks, it's not a lot for the whole year. So I think it's great that the policies have changed. Now we're at a stage where men get longer paternity leave. But I think it's the cultural change alongside that, how we encourage people to take it and make it not appealing, but not putting people down for using it, and encouraging our teammates to take that time. And I think that helps shift the balance as a start, because, that's just.
Thank you very much, Christine. Jake, what's your view on how organisations actually can, if it is the organisation's job to support that mental load, what can be done to acknowledge that?
Yeah, I don't think I fully appreciated the extra mental load until I did have enhanced responsibilities as well. It's very difficult just to kind of fathom the extra things that are going around your head on a sort of daily basis alongside working and life and everything else as well. But that increased mental load, I'd say that probably education is one of the key principles that can happen. Now, we've already heard a little bit about kind of employee resource groups in terms of kind of ERGs or communities or inclusion diversity networks. Now, I think that they have a great purpose in kind of sharing experience, but one of the key things that kind of has to go beyond that is about education past those groups as well, because I think that I can use the example of kind of some of the way our groups are structured. It's a small proportion of our colleagues overall that are a part of those groups, and actually what we want to do to create kind of that culture of understanding of mental load is to move past those groups as well. And I think that I'm going to come back to it again, sharing colleague stories. I'm a real advocate for real people sharing their voices around topics, but also education for line managers on what to do, but education for leaders as well. I think that people's experience is always different, right? So I'm sure that everyone sat in this room would have a different experience of whether it be parenting, caring, or other enhanced responsibilities as well. Everyone is an individual that has their own individual experience, and I think that sometimes to make assumptions around what someone may well want, or because they're in a certain situation, how they're going to feel or be, sometimes can be more detrimental than good as well. I think, Rachael, with your example as well, I think what your manager was not make any assumptions as well, in the story that you've kind of told us as well, and really was empathetic in approach. And I think that absolutely goes to the core of what we need to be doing. So leaders role modeling that empathetic behavior. Role modeling that empathetic behavior, so people don't feel alone in the load, normalizing the conversations, sharing of kind of colleague stories to really appreciate the scale of those enhanced responsibilities as well. And again, I'm going to come back on calling on men to normalize the conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jake, and thank you for keeping us as gender inclusive. It's really vital. I mean, it's vital for everybody. It helps everybody. And Rachael, coming back to you, I mean, parenting usually has a bit of a lead in, whether it's by birth or adoption. Caring can happen suddenly, or a change in caring can happen really suddenly overnight, for example. How do people know? I mean, Jake was talking about that whole kind of sharing of stories so that there is awareness. From your experience, how can we improve the way that people know what they can access, what support is available?
Well, that's actually much like what Jake has said. So I'm going to echo that because it does start with culture, and without culture, you don't have policy, do you? The culture is what dictates policy. But while some organisations may be playing catch up, the culture is very important. So if we have a culture with those I&D networks, which are so important for companies to embrace, put it this way, when I first went through what I went through, which was 5 years ago, I didn't know that the network that I co-chair today, I didn't know that existed. And I know that there are just so many carers with all sorts of stories and I only know this really because when we hold our, we have these little coffee sessions, they're not recorded, obviously because of the nature of caregiving, they're mostly virtual. When people come on and share their stories, you really do learn exactly what someone is going through and this burden. And you know what? Often they say, oh no, I'm glad there's no one here I know because I don't want my team to know. And actually that is a true story from last year. There was someone very senior on the call. Now I'm new here and I'm very senior and I don't want people to know that I look after my mother and she refuses care, but it's so good to have this group to talk to. So going back to your actual question, I think not only having the I&D networks are important, it's a given, But like what you were saying, I feel like this is a strong ask, but I feel like organisations should actually make those actually elevate those networks on their platforms as a priority, not just an afterthought, not just I'm going to tick this box as an organisation and show the world that we care about I&D. How about let's make it a priority, and we push that into people's laps and say, you really need to know about this, because if you don't, then how can you possibly empathise with your team if it doesn't even come into your head? I didn't plan to say that, but I flowed.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Really helpful. I'm going to say something quite controversial here, or pose a controversial question. You were talking about culture makes policy. Now, obviously none of your organisations in the audience here or online would be described by what I'm going to say, but there might be some organisations somewhere who put policy in place because it's competitive with other organisations in terms of talent attraction. It doesn't necessarily arise out of culture. It's a necessary way of attracting and retaining the talent group that's there because other organisations in the sector are doing that. So I wonder whether culture always leads on policy. I think it does in the best organisations, and that's why, you know, the policies go beyond what is normal and become groundbreaking. But I think one of the things that's coming out here is that it's the internal networks very often that create the culture and share those stories. And coming back to you, Christine, I know you've got lots to say as well about employee resource groups and their role in creating culture and getting beyond policy. What would you add?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started the Parents at Work group when I returned from maternity leave because I felt I didn't know anyone else in the business who was in a similar position to me. And it started very small and it's grown significantly. And we now have, you know, over 100 people in our network of Teams chat, which is a big amount of people, but it's still not a huge, it's a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of parents there definitely are in Howden. But I think the employee resource groups are fantastic because you are on the ground with people, your fellow colleagues, and you can talk about your experiences, and it's not a senior person coming to you and asking you what you think about certain things. I don't know, I feel it's a very empathetic environment where people feel they can come and share their stories. And one of the great things that we found is because people have been open and shared how their experiences have gone, we've then been able to put things in place that we think help support the policies that are already there. So an example of this is we had some feedback that people were not having good experiences when they were returning from parental leave, maternity and paternity. They were not having the conversations that they'd hoped for with their managers. And so we worked alongside HR and we put together these toolkits. Now, they're there to guide and encourage people to have confident conversations with their teammates and their managers. So we've got one for each. And these are now sent out by HR. And I just think these are so pivotal because it goes beyond the policy. It's about having that resource there if you're not comfortable in having those conversations, because it goes, I think you made a point earlier, not everybody is empathetic and it doesn't come naturally to us all. But I think as a leader, you have to embrace that skill and find ways to better it if it doesn't come naturally to you, and it's using resources that are available to you in the business, be that policy or, you know, these additional things that we're trying to put together.
Thanks, Christine. That's really helpful and really practical. And I think what we're hearing there is if it doesn't come naturally to managers and leaders to create the culture, then we need to kind of give a name to the moments. You know, if you call something a pre-leave review or a post-leave review or something like that, it's a conversation that's more likely to happen because it's got a name and there's an expectation associated with it. And one better if you give people a checklist for that, which is very much the kind of thing that our parental leave toolkit also does at Bright Horizons. So we know the kind of value of that. If you give people a checklist, it's going to open up conversations they might not have thought to have, and particularly around parental leave. Many managers are so worried about saying the wrong thing that they actually say nothing because that feels safer, but that doesn't get us very far at all, and there's zero empathy in that.
Yeah, and sorry, can I just add, I just think it doesn't give the space for someone to come back and share their experience, kind of maybe give reverse constructive criticism of how they found it, if they don't have the opportunity to bring that to the table.
So true, absolutely. One of the thoughts I've been having listening to us, there's a phrase, microaggressions, about the sort of little ways in which people put each other down or kind of make things difficult for each other in the workplace. And I wonder, I don't know if there is a word at the moment, but I'm going to sort of try the word micro-empathies. It feels like we're trying to create micro-empathies here. We're trying to create those moments where empathy is built, to identify them, to have more of them, to kind of highlight them and showcase them when they happen. So I'd love to see something like that become a thing. So I would love to come to each of you in turn, perhaps starting with you, Jake. Beyond all of the amazing insights that you've each shared so far, is there anything else that you've come across practically, either something that's been done for you or something you've managed to do for yourself that has made a practical difference, and perhaps coming back to that idea that we have to get the job done. The whole purpose of the business is to be providing insurance or whatever role we're playing in that. How are we sustaining that and also being the person that we want to be with regard to our enhanced responsibilities outside of work? What practical things have helped?
Yeah, so I can probably share that. So my daughter arrived early as well, which was a bit of a shock during the middle of the night. So she was supposed to be in for a planned C-section, decided that date didn't work for her, and then she wanted to turn up 2 weeks earlier than that date as well. And I think, I'd say, like Rachel's story, there was never a conversation really about work or practicalities or what was going to happen. I think I messaged my line manager. It was silly early in the morning just to say, baby's on the way, I'm going to have to kind of be off from now, but the conversation never happened about, well, in the system, where's your paternity leave going to go, or kind of those sort of constraints that actually, if I think about it from a process perspective for the business, you probably want to have it all squared away in the box, all nice and processed in the right way, but actually that was an afterthought. And I would say that was such a relief. There was never a focus on kind of, well, how are we going to make sure that happens, or this meeting's coming up, what's going to happen with that. It was just that'll be taken off of your plate. My line manager can go in, see what those items were, pick them up, just ask me to say if there's anything urgent that she needs to get to straight away, just let her know via text and she'll pick it up and kind of take it out of the way, and we'll just deal with the return date, the kind of system stuff after I'm back as well. And that was such a huge relief to me, because going through that moment, the last thing you want to be thinking is, or have I got to move that 10 o'clock meeting because I'm not going to be on it anymore, or have I got to rearrange something that I'm supposed to be at as well. It just took all of the burden away and just enabled me to kind of be there in the moment, supporting my partner as well.
And I bet even before you were invited to be on a panel talking about this, that's an instance that you've remembered. It's one of those moments that matter. It shapes your employee experience. It shapes your experience of your employer and your likelihood probably of staying in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Colleague engagement survey just launched and I ticked the longest box. Just put it out there.
Great. Rachel, same to you. What practical step has either been offered to you or that you've managed to make happen yourself that's helped with your combination of work and family?
Well, yeah, two things. So when all of that was happening, and I managed to get him into a care home, amazingly, long story. Anyway, he was, I was told to come up, and I knew that this was going to be the beginning of a long time, because, I'm going up to watch him die, and then he died. I'm not going to go back to work. So I had such a, this was only 2 years ago, and my manager she's fantastic, and I knew it wouldn't be a problem. I just knew that because she was even more empathetic than my first manager at WTW. Anyway, I knew that she just said, just go and just get in touch when you can. But I'm out. So I didn't go back to work for about 6 months for obvious reasons. I think it was 6 months, something like that. And I knew it would be fine. And she just, like what you were saying, that I didn't have to contact HR. I didn't have to go through this policy stuff. It was just understanding. And that was, obviously I needed that. I couldn't think of work. I'm thinking of the obvious here. So the other thing I will mention though, and this is because I realise I'm the only one on this panel who's not a parent. But if you are a carer or a parent, there is one thing that I have taken for myself at work, only because I live about 2 hours away. It's a 2-hour commute. But the working styles that we have is brilliant, because after COVID, we were told to take the working styles, which was hybrid or working from home or office worker. And I thought, I'm going to be working from home. I'll come into the office, but I am going to tick that box that's working from home. But actually, it's not really to do with, I'm finding it's not to do with culture anymore. Policy anymore. That's to do with culture. And it's understood across the building. Hopefully, I can't speak for other countries, but I would say that is our culture of this is your working style. And if you're a parent or carer or going through what I was going through, and I could have ticked that box 5 years ago when it began, I would have ticked working from home, and then I would have gone to Yorkshire and I would have just been with him. I wish that had happened then. So yeah, big long-winded point of saying that is very helpful for me, and I know for others, parents, everyone.
And I just would like to say, I imagine that you must have been really performing in your role for the organisation to value you so much to enable you to do that. I think, that must be...
I hope so. I imagine so. I hope so. I think that's probably it, because I did have a very good relationship with my manager. I felt valued. I felt trusted. One other point I just wanted to make with work-life balance, which is what this working style thing is all about. If you're a manager, I feel... Not most managers, I hope these days know this, but if you can trust your team, just trust them to deliver. Don't micromanage them 9 to 5. Just accept that they've got responsibilities, and you say, okay, are you able to deliver this by this time? Yes, no, have the conversation, but have the conversation and then just trust them. And now let them go. Don't watch them on Teams, yellow light, green light, red light, wiggle the mouse. I need to look after my baby, but I'm going to wiggle the mouse so my manager doesn't come down hard on me. Just trust them, have the conversation, and we come back to empathy, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. So very clear on outcomes. I think we all need to be, don't we? Because if you don't know what somebody is there to deliver, if the job description isn't clear, if it's not outcome focused, it's very hard for people to generate trust by showing they're delivering, even with an alternative working arrangement. So we need that clarity, and then given that clarity, step back and don't micromanage. Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Christine, any practical step that you would share?
I'm just going to go back to what I said earlier about joining ERGs. I think without the Parents at Work network, I couldn't be the person that I am today. There's people in there that have shared their experiences, which have changed the way I think about things. But it's having that space that I could go and talk about if I'd had a sleepless night, but I was still coming in and having to work in the office 9 to 5, and then go pick up my children and take them home, put them to bed. All of those things. It's having that space to be able to talk about that, so that I can then bring my best self to work, because my team are fantastic. I've worked with them all a very long time, but sometimes it's not the time or space to be talking about things outside of work. So it's nice to have a space to go to, share those experiences, and come back, bring your best self to your team.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. I think what all of you are doing today is furthering that normalisation of being able to be brilliant at work and have a whole lot of stuff happening at home and being open and vulnerable about that, I think is really, really helpful. Thank you so much. I wonder whether we have questions here in the room, questions online. There's one over there. We've got some roving mics. Bradley, I don't know if there are questions queuing up online, or is it Luca? Have you got them there? Thank you, Luca. Oh, yeah. Do we have a question over here?
Yeah, I can always chat.
Oh.
You know, mine's not a question. It was just all the panelists are great. I just wanted to thank you, Rachel, because that story was obviously very difficult for you to talk about, and it was really impressive. And you're an impressive individual, so thank you for that.
Oh.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
useful.
Great.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room?
Hello. I'd like to reiterate what was said. You're all brilliant. My name's Anjali. I'm from Gallagher Benefit Services. I have a question, just more on the practical sense. One of the concerns managers and businesses have is the snowball effect and creating those boundaries between what is supported and what teams can work around and what can be picked up by other people, and what might create sort of operational difficulty and sort of towing that line between the two. So how would you suggest that line is navigated?
Who's got something on that?
I'm sorry, I'm not a manager, but I just think having open conversations with your team and seeing how you can support one another helps. If you know that someone needs the space to take a step back, bringing other people into the conversation to see how they can support the team and work together to the end goal.
I think sometimes as well the perception can outweigh the reality as well. So I think sometimes when we think about, you know, changing a policy, or we think about, you know, doing something differently, sometimes there can be an assumption that actually, you know, if I think about offering roles as part-time, for example, you know, some organizations may well think that actually, well, everyone's then going to go and want to work part-time, or everyone's going to want to put in a flexible working request. But actually, you know, there are studies out there, and particularly in our industry, actually, a study on Zurich when they changed their advertising policy to include all roles as part-time and flexible. Actually, one of the concerns was they thought they were going to have a massive rise in part-time or flexible working. But actually, now make sure I quote the statistics right here. I believe that it was a 0.1% increase overall in part-time working roles over that period as well. So I would also say that, you know, sometimes I don't necessarily think the fear or the kind of concern may match the reality as well in that instance.
Thanks for your question, Anjali. I would add, counterintuitively, it may sound in some way, if we're talking about snowballing, it's pretty important to recognise the other life responsibilities that people have in addition to parenting and caring in order to have better team conversations. So, you know, somebody's training for a marathon, somebody's studying for an MBA, whatever it may be, to acknowledge those, and then it feels that there's more equity as well. So you don't get a sort of backlash effect.
Is this mic working? I've got a question from online. What is the best way to build engagement when you have a newly formed parents and carers ERG? That might be.
Christine might have something on that. Thanks, Luca.
I mean, our ERG has been around for a very long time, and we only recently did a campaign earlier this year where we highlighted the things that we'd worked on and sort of did a refresh, and that was how we gained some new people into our network. We've worked together to put together, sorry, I'm repeating myself. We worked together to put the key points we wanted to get across. You know, we wanted to share our toolkits, we wanted to share the buddy network that we'd set up, and we wanted to showcase that our ERG was there. So we came together, we got a date, we set up a space in our canteen sort of area that we have here in Howden on 15th floor. And we were just there, sitting there, available for anyone to come and ask us questions. And we had cakes and we had some merchandise to entice people in. but yeah, we just was there to speak to people, and we had a variety of people come up to us throughout the day. And we did share some things via email as well and online, but I think we were trying to cover all bases because we know not everyone wants emails in their inbox in addition to what they've already got. Not everyone checks the workplace, and not everyone comes and wants to talk to people in person. So it's sort of having a bit of a different avenues for people to be able to approach you.
I'd like to add to that if I can. So with our network, it's actually only been around for 2 years. This is the second year, I think that's correct. So creating engagement and getting people to sign up to the mailing list without piggybacking over central emails to go caregivers. So I found, there's two things. One is actually the biggest one is if you have other networks, what I find useful is to team up with those other networks, and you can cross them. And I sort of purposely took on both of these networks because I'm passionate about both of these things, but it really worked. So I co-lead the neurodiversity network, and then I co-chair the caregivers. And then I was like, let's bring those together. Parents who have neurodiverse kids or suspected neurodiverse children. And we had to go from 30 minutes to an hour because we had, instead of 10, we had 50. And it was just this online copy session. But that really elevated caregivers. And then we had loads of people signing up to a mailing list. That we also have an internal social media thing. I don't know how many other businesses have this, but when we create engaging, fun posts, not just signposting, like, did you know that we are the Caregivers Network, blah, blah, blah. It's more, do you have these needs, or, when your baby throws up at you in the middle of the night, do you want to talk about that? All these things, make it funny, make it engaging, and people pay attention. Talk to people like humans, and then they're going to engage. They're going to wonder what's going on. That and your example, brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. I mean, lovely. We've got a question over there. We'll come to you in just a moment. Just to add to that, we sometimes provide events for networks, and provocative titles is a really good way forward. So we have one called "Who Takes the Rubbish Out? Renegotiating the Domestic Contract." That gets lots of people. And if you want to attract men, "Raising Smart Kids" is a good title as well. I mean, not because in theory, but because in practice, that's what we've seen. So thank you. Let's have your question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys so much for the panel. It's been really interesting to sit in on. For context, my name is Damisola. I report on diversity and inclusion for Insurance Post. And my question was mostly for Rachel, but anyone else can obviously feel free to butt in. Obviously, we spoke about the parental leave toolkit and kind of having a framework to ask certain questions and kind of engage with people after a big life event. And I was wondering if there was sort of an equivalent of that for carers that would be valuable. So maybe the sort of life event or the sort of questions that you think would be thoughtful to be included in that sort of framework if anyone wanted to do something similar for carers. So they kind of had that avenue to have those conversations that we mentioned is really valuable in Christine's example. Yeah.
By life events, so is it sort of the equivalent of, say, when a parent gives birth? Is that what you mean?
And then the questions as well that would be helpful for managers to ask in that context. Yeah.
That's quite a tricky one, isn't it? Because like I said, many people don't share that they are carers. So how do we know a life event has happened? But I suppose what you mean is when my life event happened, and be empathetic and ask the question. I mean, that's a tough one, because as far as I know, there's not many policies that exist for those life events yet. What can I say from my personal experience? When I was brave enough to talk about it, then my manager kept in touch with me. Perhaps there should be something like, okay, this person is, Rachel's dad's just died, and she's gone through all of this for years. Let's create a check-in to check how they are. Not, and I don't mean, there's all this work. Don't mention work. Just don't mention work. Not interested in work at that time, I assure you. But a check-in to see how they're doing, actually, how they're feeling. do they feel like they can come back to work? Should we be thinking about something else? Or do they just want to chat? Is there some, and this person may be very worried about their career because they're taking so much time off, which I know is very common in that scenario. So maybe it's a two-way conversation that is from a manager that genuinely cares and wants to understand, you're going through this, but how are you feeling about your career? Not quite those words, but, you know, again, be more empathetic, but just have a conversation like you would a friend. Just say, do you want to go part-time? Shall we change things for you? What do you need? Just ask them what they need, instead of stating policy facts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, can I just add, so within our toolkit, some of the things that we have is things like, would you like to be kept in touch whilst you're on leave with the team? Would you like to attend team events? Would you like me to email you or text you or call you or whatever?
What do you need?
It's quite, it seems quite obvious to ask these questions, but I think sometimes they're just not ones that come to mind when you're in a conversation that's unfamiliar, or you don't know if you can ask the questions. And I think it's just it might be helpful to have a carers one, but it's really difficult because carers can be so broad, can't it?
Massive, huge, yeah.
Big so you can't ask specific questions, but you can have a bit of guidance, or maybe even saying, check in with your person after 1 month if you haven't, for people who work more practically and like to map it out.
And sometimes offering a buddy, sometimes you may not want your manager to keep in touch with you, but you may want somebody from within the team just to feed you useful information and news. So those kind of things. So I think, you know, both asking what you need in a very general sense, but also those specific prompts can be helpful. Would this be helpful? How about this? Would you like this? Right, thank you.
Sorry, you're going to get a response from all of us now as well. So look, the only other point I'll make, and I'll be brief, Luca, is that I think, you know, if you're a line manager and you're in this situation and you're not sure, and empathy actually, you know, isn't your natural default position as well, go and speak to your HR teams as well, because they're there to support you with these conversations as well. So I'll be brief and just end there.
Thanks very much, Jake. I know Luca's away from the laptop, but was there another question online at all, Luca?
You unfortunately run out of time. We've had quite a lot of questions come through about working from home, which I think is a really, really important topic to a lot of us, I think, in the room. But we're about to be cut off in 2 minutes, so it's unfortunately we'll need to wrap up.
Yeah.
So, but for everyone to ask a question, thank you so much, and it's really useful intel to hear people talking about work from home policies.
Can I push us right to the end? There was one question in the room there. We've got 2 minutes. Can we do it in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Sorry, I work at Gallagher. My name's Michelle. Should have started there. One of the things that I'd like to understand is, what is the use of, and what is your experience using data? Because for some of the organizations I've worked with, tracking the experience of carers and parents years after has shown a discrepancy in promotions and reward. And I'd like to understand, as ERGs and as leaders, are we pushing for data and how are we using it?
I mean, my experience is organisations that we've worked with that have put in place a programme for managing the parent transition have seen their return rates rise by between 12 and 14 percentage points, their maternity and similar return rates. So that data is extremely valuable because it makes the business case.
For everyone online as well, thank you so much for your time. We have come to an end now, so thank you so much for joining us for today's session. And I will allow everyone in the room just to wrap up this conversation. But thank you everyone online for joining us today at Dive In.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.